Hi Guava Bees, and welcome to another episode of the Dear Guava Bean podcast. Remember, submit your questions in the sandbox or on the website and we could be answering yours in the next episode. I'm Francesca and with me is Claire.
Hello.
And today's question is from Christina, who asks, Dear Guava Bean, after 4 years in permanent jobs, I'm now back to freelancing and back to enjoying the flexibility, freedom, and especially the variety. Can I ask how best to brand or sell your services and bring all the different aspects under one umbrella? I would love to hear your thoughts as I'm currently struggling a little with that. As a multi-potentialite or multi-talented person, depending on who you listen to, Marie Forleo or Putty Like, which is a blog I love, I'm exactly the same. I personally have a ton of different interests, and throughout my 10-year freelancing career, I've done lots of different things. So I 100% understand this struggle of not quite knowing how to advertise your services, or when you have a ton of different interests and skills, how to market them and just find clients that fit. I definitely have some thoughts on this, but first I'd like to know, Claire, is this something you've ever struggled with, or have you always kind of been a specialist?
No, definitely. I tried out a lot of different things. Before I found my niche, I was a social media manager, a virtual assistant, a project manager, copywriter for a little while. I was a proofreader. I edited novels. I tried a lot of different things, but I feel like my work kind of became a career when I chose to specialize and do Facebook ads only. And I still do lots of other little things for Facebook ads. Like I still sometimes write copy for the ads and I design images, but really I specialize in one thing. And I feel like having that really helped me get to where I am today. Like I think it's very important to niche down as soon as possible. Even if you have lots of different skills and you enjoy a lot of variety, there's a way to find a job or create a job that combines all your favorite skills, but you still specialize working for a specific type of client or in a specific industry. But that's just my experience. What is your experience? Because I don't consider myself a multi-talented person. I was always just searching for my one thing. And so when I found my one thing, I was like, okay, this is it. Thank God I found it. I'm not doing anything else.
Yeah. So personally, I guess I'm not necessarily the opposite, but the idea of specializing long term and that being my career is quite scary to me, because I have so many different skills that I want to monetize or make use of. So for me, it took me a long time of experimenting with different kinds of work and figuring out the types of clients I wanted to do and what my day wanted to look like as well, to kind of really figure out that actually I didn't need to necessarily specialize in the way that I thought. Now, in my opinion, that's different to not choosing a niche. I think there are pitfalls of not choosing a niche or trying to squeeze yourself into a box that you don't fit in. I think if you try and do something because it worked for someone else, so for example, choosing a niche because somebody told you it was profitable, or not picking a niche at all, it can leave you feeling quite unmotivated. I think it can be hard and really overwhelming to look for clients or complete projects. And you probably feel like you're quite unsatisfied. Like in the past, I've tried to fit myself into a box or into a niche that I felt was way too narrow for me. So what I found works is actually creating your own custom niche that doesn't necessarily try and fit you into a box, but rather it fits around you. So it's probably worth also mentioning at this point as well is this is something I, again, have struggled with, and I know a lot of people who are multi-talented struggle with this, is wanting to monetize everything. So just because you can do something as a freelancer doesn't mean you necessarily should. So I've got kind of half and half. Like I do a lot of analytical work, but I also like to be creative as well. This is the case for a lot of people. You know, you often find one person likes to do spreadsheets and another person likes to do design, but I like to kind of do both. And so it can be difficult, especially with the creative things, to not want to monetize them. Sometimes it's okay to actually just leave some things as hobbies, or just do them because you enjoy it, or do them as a volunteer for like a charity or something like that. Not everything's necessarily going to fit into the clients that you want to end up working for. It can feel quite stressful. So the way I like to kind of say about making a custom niche is factoring in a few things. So firstly, discover what you're good at. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean as a freelancer. It could have been, you know, in your personal life. It could have been in 9-to-5 jobs that you've had, or volunteer positions, or school, or lots of different areas. But it can be a good idea to jot down what you think you're good at. So it could be you're really good at talking on the phone to customers, or you're great at writing copy or designing, and you know how to use spreadsheets and databases, you know how to code, that kind of thing. Then you want to kind of look at the types of companies or clients you've worked for in the past as well. So for example, you might have been an intern, a publisher, or you were an account manager at an insurance company, or anything like that, really, just anywhere that you may have already had work experience, because it kind of gives you an idea of the sizes of companies that you've worked for, the industries as well. And also another important part of this is obviously sort of appreciating and thinking about what your passions might be. So this is kind of quite a divisive topic, because some people say that you should follow your passion and other people say you should just leave your passion for your free time. And I kind of think there's a bit of both here. I think that if you love doing a certain thing, so maybe you're passionate about the environment or music or politics or something, you know, that could be a hobby, but you can find ways you could factor it into your final niche if it's, you know, a specific kind of company or organization. But consider it. Just, I would say, write these down because they might come in handy. After you've figured out kind of what your passions are, I would definitely also consider what kind of personality you have. You know, I personally am an introvert. I know a lot of people are obviously extroverts and even ambiverts. You kind of gravitate between the two, and it's an important part in figuring out what your custom niche is going to be, because I think as a freelancer we can be fairly isolated unless we're working in a co-working space or we're part of a big remote team, that kind of thing. So kind of consider how you would end up working with people, and I think it does affect your happiness, you know, depending on how you're working and who you're working for. And also it can be a really effective thing to do is actually turn to the people you know. The people that are around us most of the time probably notice things about us that we don't necessarily know, and they may know some strengths that we might not even consider. So I would also just see what other people say. You don't always have to go and use that, but it can be really interesting and insightful to understand how other people see you as well. Really, I think once you've kind of got an idea about all these different things, you know, what you're good at, where you've worked, what you like, what your passions are, it's time to kind of connect them all together. And like for me, it wasn't obvious. It took years, and it's not going to be obvious straight away if you're trying this. It can be something as simple as writing all of these down and then just circling the ones that stick out to you most and finding a way that you can connect them. So an example I always think of is like, you know how people always have like these dream jobs, you know, if you love music, it doesn't mean that you have to go and just be a lead guitarist, right? You can always find ways of creating your niche around music, but maybe it can be using your skills. So say if you're really good at using social media and you can create strategies, how about working for like an events company or a band or something, and actually being a freelancer that schedules, you know, social media and grows people's accounts for like bands or events places, that kind of thing. There's always other ways into an industry that you love, and you can create work and find clients that you really care about, but without it having to be this kind of dream that where a lot of luck is involved, you know? So I would definitely do that. Just kind of write down what you really love to do, what you're good at, and kind of connect the dots that way. And for me, like I've already said, it took years to get to a point where I felt like I had created a business as a freelancer where I could incorporate all of those aspects about me and what I love. And also it's okay that things evolve. So again, this is a lesson learned after years of struggling, is that it's okay that things change. Just because you decide something doesn't mean you have to stick with it for the rest of your life. And I feel like sometimes that's something that is quite daunting, is when you have lots of different interests, you think that you have to put yourself in this box and that's the way it has to stay, or clients won't be interested. And that isn't the case. I think as soon as you kind of remove that restriction and that mindset where you're going to be stuck doing it a certain way because everyone else seems to be doing it that way, that doesn't necessarily mean that's what you have to do. I think that as long as you're happy with the fact that you may change, your interests may change, and with that comes new opportunities with new clients. I think that as soon as you realize that, the happier time you're going to have and the more success you're going to have. That's certainly been, my point of view. Obviously, I know that's different for everybody because it depends what kind of person you are. For example, Claire, I know you've said that you don't consider yourself a multi-talented person, but you have kind of gone through your career trying different things and seeing what fits you. That could be a way that you do it too. I think it really does depend on the kind of person you are.
It's very important also to know what you want. And sometimes you have to take a lot of these jobs and find out what you don't want in order to find what it is. And in a lot of ways, and this is one of the things I really love about freelancing, that you can try out different jobs without having to commit 100% to any of them. Like if I wanted to go get a regular job, like I would probably have to sign a contract. I would have to be in that job for a year. It would be a serious commitment and I would have to work my way up. But with freelancing, you can try out several different jobs at the same time. So it gives you a lot of variety. But the downside of having that variety is almost like being a kid in a candy shop where, there's so many things that you enjoy doing. How do I bring it all together? And for me, one thing that really helped was the Hedgehog Concept. And I explain a lot more about this concept in the GUAVABEAN starter course, but I can also include some links to some YouTube videos that explain it. And basically, it's similar to what you said, Francesca, where you start by writing down, firstly, all the things that you really enjoy doing, because if you're going to do anything long term, it has to be something that you enjoy. Otherwise, you're just going to burn out. So it's very important to start with something that you enjoy and you can see yourself doing for a long time. Like write down all the different services that you offer and all the services that you could offer that you really enjoy doing. And then go through that list and circle all the things that you are confident in. You're going to need to sell your services. You're going to need to talk to people. You need to be very confident in what it is you're selling. It's not enough to just enjoy what you're doing. Like I enjoy drawing, but I would never try to sell my drawing skills to anybody because I know I'm terrible at it. So it's something that you have to enjoy, but also you have to know beyond a shadow of a doubt that you can get good results for your clients in this one area. And that confidence will give you, the balls that you need to ask for the rates that you want and the prices that you want and to go after the clients that you want. It's really important to know what you enjoy. And then on top of that, what you're confident in. And then the third part where you bring it all together. And it's basically the circle diagram where you have 3 circles. And what you're trying to get is the overlapping part in the middle. The first circle is enjoy. The second circle is confidence. And then the third circle is getting paid. Because it's not just enough to have something that you enjoy and that you're confident in. If you're going to commit to a niche, it should be a niche that can afford you the kind of lifestyle and income that you want to have. And so if you're planning this kind of thing, you have to think about that and take that into consideration and think about like what would your dream income be as a freelancer per month, and then look at all these different skills that you've circled that you enjoy and that you're confident in, and then go through them and ask yourself, like, can I get paid what I want to get paid in this job? And if you go through them that way, you can narrow them down. And at the end of this, you should be left with 2 or 3 things that fit within all those 3 circles. You enjoy it, you're confident in it, and you know that it will pay you well. And that's how I chose my niche. I tried a lot of different things and I enjoyed a lot of different things, but there was something about marketing that I just knew I could get paid well in marketing for my time. And I knew that there was so much to learn that I would continue to enjoy it. I would continue to find ways to keep it interesting. And I was confident that I could do this very well because I understood the numbers, I understood the math. And because of that, I chose to go in the marketing direction. And for me, it was a lot like, kind of like spouse shopping. I feel like finding your niche as a freelancer. People are scared to commit to a niche, just like people are scared to commit to being married to one person for the rest of their life for the same reason. It's like, how do I know this is the right one for me? I can never change again. There's so much pressure that comes with it. But thankfully with a niche, there's no contract. You can change whenever you want. The freedom of having a niche gives you so much advantages. Like, I recommend everyone, even if you think that you're a multi-potentialite, I still think you should know what your niche is, and you should try to speak specifically to a specific type of audience. And Seth Godin talks about this a lot in his marketing. The more specific that you can be, the more people will resonate with your message, the more you'll be able to find the right types of clients, the more you'll be able to charge what you want to make. And so instead of working with 10 different clients doing 4 to 5 different services, maybe you work with 3 to 4 clients and you offer the same service to every one of them. But it's an amazing service. It's like an exceptional service that they could not get anywhere else. And because you are so good and so experienced and so knowledgeable at what you do, you can charge a premium for it. And I'm just recommending this to people because it's what I do and it's because it's what's worked for me. But there's lots of different ways to do this. You can always try to switch things up, bring in different areas of your personality, have lots of different jobs. There's million different ways to be a freelancer, and there's a lot of different ways to be successful at it. But if you're looking to bring all your things under one umbrella, I would encourage you to pick the top 3 or 4 services. I wouldn't even do that. I would just pick the top 2 or 3 services that you think you can really excel at, and you can really provide so much value that you will stand out from the rest. And then just focus on those ones. Just focus on being really good at a few things versus being good at so many different things. And at this stage, I would say it's not that important to brand your services. Like, you are the branding as a freelancer. When people talk to you, they're not talking to a brand or a company, they're talking to you as an individual. So it's not so important to brand or sell your services. It's more important to know your services and to know your client so that when you talk to them, you can build this trust and this relationship where they feel confident working with you no matter what skill or what service you're pitching to them. That's just my opinion. I strongly feel that people should find a niche and specialize, but I completely understand that it takes time. You got to figure things out. You got to try a lot of different things, and sometimes you got to try a million different things before you find that one that you can really commit to long term.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of important points that you've just covered there. I think one thing that you just made me remember is that with the whole branding thing, I think a lot of people put way too much importance on having a brand. Like, when I say a brand, I mean like your website and like the way that you come across sort of in your copy, and like having ads and things that just aren't necessarily important for a freelancer, especially in the beginning. A lot of people I speak to spend way too much time worrying about that stuff, when a lot of the time it does not make a difference in comparison to something like just building relationships with your clients or potential clients, and just being consistent and being good at what you do and figuring out what it is that makes you different. I don't think you necessarily have to spend so much time on like tweaking your website to be perfect, or like creating like an avatar that you share everywhere that's of you. I think a lot of it is like the creative stuff that maybe just wait and come later if you need it. I think more importantly, it is just building relationships and stuff, which is more important. In terms of thinking of kind of specializing, I think that does work for certain people, and for other people it can feel stifling and actually very scary and can take the joy out of freelancing. I think it's so important, like you've already said and I've already said too, is not just to obviously pick stuff that you like and are good at, but that gives you the lifestyle you want. Because I think a lot of the time, and a lot of the kind of other information about being a freelancer that's out there is focusing on how can I be rich? How can I make 6 figures a year? Not everyone wants that. I think that something that I struggled with is the fact that I wasn't making nearly as much as a lot of people were that I was coming across online. And that made me feel like I'd failed as a freelancer. I think it's important to remember that that isn't always everyone's goals. And if that isn't your goal, that's okay. That is totally fine. I think deciding what services to offer, also means thinking about what you actually want from life, what you want from your business. I think it's so important to make sure it is something that's profitable and that people want. But if that's all you're focusing on, you're not going to be happy, So like we've both already said, it is about finding a balance. I think it's so important. Just because you are good at something, you don't necessarily have to offer it if you don't want, Everyone works differently. Like you said, there's a million different ways to be a freelancer. And it's true. Some people like to have a different kind of work with different clients. So they might do, say, analytics for one client and graphic design for another and writing for another. Or they might do a combination of skills for each client they work for. Or they might do something really mundane for a client and then save their creativity for their free time. That's all okay. It depends what you want. And I think a big lesson that I've learned is to actually go out there, find that work and figure out if it's something you actually want to do. Because I think we can agonize over worrying about putting all these skills into an umbrella. But what if we figure out how to do it, we then go and do it for a client and actually we hate it? It would be rubbish. You've spent so much time on figuring it out and how it's going to work logistically. But actually, if your heart isn't in it, then you've wasted a lot of time and, you're not happy. And your clients aren't happy because you're unmotivated and you don't really want to be doing the work. I've certainly been there. I've been in a situation where I had this massive goal of doing this work. In fact, I'll tell you what it was. It was being in a magazine. That's all I wanted to do was be in a magazine. I want to be a published author, and I had this goal and I reached it way sooner than what I expected. And I should have been elated with that thing that I'd achieved. And it didn't mean as much as what I thought it would, because it just turned out that my heart wasn't in it as much as I thought it was going to be. And I wouldn't have known that unless I'd done it. I'm not saying that's a waste of time. I actually think it was a valuable lesson, because otherwise I'd still be chasing it and worrying about it and sort of thinking I'd failed because I hadn't done it. But because I did it, I've kind of got it out of my system, and I know what to focus on. It's sort of pushed me in the direction more of what I want to do. And I encourage any freelancer to do the work and figure it out first before you sit and worry about it. I think a lot of time, when you're new, and I think that is especially the case when you're new to freelancing and you feel like you have so many different skills, you don't really know quite where to place them. Well, I wouldn't worry about that so much in the beginning. Although I don't really necessarily specialize as such, I do agree that having a niche is important. It's just figuring out what that niche is and building it around you rather than putting yourself in that box. Because if you have got lots of skills, it can feel like you're being limited, like you would be in a traditional job sometimes. If it's a job that you just only have a certain amount of things to do and you feel like you're bored and not challenged enough, it can feel like that. If you have a lot of skills and a lot to offer, if your niche is too narrow, you're not going to be happy. But I do think the opposite end of the spectrum, where you haven't got any niche and you just do every kind of work, then I think sometimes if a challenge is too big, then you feel unmotivated. If you can literally go out there and you can find any job, where are you going to start? It's going to be too hard and you won't feel as motivated compared to if you say, I'm going to target clients in this industry, or I'm going to target a heart-centered business, or I want to work with small companies, or, that kind of thing. I think it's important to just figure out what you want, and it's okay to change it later on, but to weigh everything up and try it. Don't just think about it, but go out and try it.
Yeah, those are some really good points. I like that story. It is true that oftentimes the thing that you think you want doesn't actually turn out to be what you actually want. But I guess just to answer this question, so how do you bring it all under one umbrella? And my advice here would be to think of it in terms of the people that you're working for. Like, instead of thinking of it in terms of services, like how do you bring all your services under one umbrella? Try to think about like who is the top like one or two types of clients that you work with and that you want to continue to work with. Bring it under, like bring all your services under a type of client, and that way you can do multiple services for them. Like, for example, with my work with marketing, I don't do Facebook ads for just anyone. I only do Facebook ads for online business owners. And I only do digital products. So I don't do e-commerce. I don't do brick and mortar. I don't do a lot of the other types of Facebook ads because I've done them and I've tried it and I found it to be not fun. And so I found kind of my specific niche where I can thrive in and I can grow. And I've picked that audience. Now I only work with online business owners who provide online services. That's just my niche. That's what I'm sticking to. And underneath that niche, I can do a lot of different things. It's not just marketing. I also do a lot of strategy work, setting up the ads. And then we also do a lot of creative work, designing the ads. And then we also do a lot of analytical work, looking at the numbers and figuring out how to optimize. And so underneath that niche, there's a lot of different room to expand and to offer different services. But I think the most important thing is to know who it is that you want to work for. If you don't know the what, at least you should know the who. And that will help you figure out like what services they need, and then how you can brand or sell your services to fit with what they're looking for.
Exactly. And also the why as well. So not just what you do, but why you do it. I think that also plays a huge part. Again, if you know why you're offering a certain service or why you work with certain clients, then I think that also helps you figure out how those services are going to fit into it. You know, for example, like I said, I have lots of different skills, but I've kind of figured out that I like to work for companies who like to teach their customers something new. So whether that's a company that have, say, a community where they learn something new, it could be like a membership, you know, like GUAVABEAN, for example. It could be companies that aren't just selling something to make a profit, but they actually care about the message that they're sending to their customers. That way I kind of figure out where my skills fit into, and I find clients actually that are a joy to work with as opposed to just performing tasks. You know, I feel like I really will only take work now that I care about, that is part of something that I personally am invested in too. And again, that's not always the case because, you know, although I encourage that for freelancers, it's not always possible. If you're new, that can be quite tricky to figure out. So, but later on down the line, it's something I would definitely encourage all freelancers to take something that they care about and not something that they're just good at, but, you know, that means something. One thing I will just add, though, is Christina obviously says as well that she's gone back to freelancing. So I don't know Christina's scenario, but the way I would understand it is maybe that she was a freelancer, then had a traditional job, and then went back to freelancing. I'm kind of thinking as well, when you're thinking about how to figure out your niche, maybe think about what you did before and maybe what worked then and what didn't. Maybe you can learn some lessons from the time you were a freelancer before. You know, why didn't it work out for you? Was it the clients? Was it the way that you structured your work? Was it the skills? You know, they're all things that you want to consider as well when you're thinking about your niche. And I think it's difficult to say just one answer because every freelancer listening to this who are struggling with the same thing are going to have a different method of working and a different personality. And, you know, some people want to be a specialist. Some people might prefer to cast their net far and wide and have lots of different kind of smaller parts of their freelancing business. But I think it's all just finding a balance, which we've covered.
Yeah, that's a good point. Going back to what was working and what didn't work, and try to learn from that. If there was anything in your job that didn't work, try to learn from that and stay away from it. And also just to look at, you know, the industries and see where the demand is. And that's a big important part because it's not just about what you want to offer. It's also about what people want to buy. Like, what do they want to invest in? And so, you know, making sure to choose a niche or a service or an umbrella that's going to be growing in the future, that you know that you will continue to have opportunities and it's not going to limit you. Other than that, I feel like we've covered this one in good detail. It's really tricky to brand and sell your services. I would say if, you know, people who are struggling with it are probably still figuring it out. Like, they probably still are in that dating process where they're like trying different things out and they haven't found the one to commit to yet. And that's probably just something that's going to come with time and experience. And then, like you said, knowing yourself, knowing the who and the why, and making very conscious decisions to move yourself forward in a direction that you know that you can grow and it's not going to feel stifling or limited.
I think sometimes one final point that I'll just say is that often, you know, if you've either been a freelancer or you're new or you're even thinking about being a freelancer, there's so much information out there that it can be easier to just read about what others have found success in. And it can be daunting and challenging to do the work and figure it out for yourself. But that is the most important step, because you don't know what's going to work for you until you've done it. So I would just encourage anybody who's unsure to find clients and do the work and see how you feel about it. I think that's so important, because just because you're reading about something and say influencers are telling you what worked for them and that it'll work for you, you know, we've all heard it before and taken advice from so many different people. It can be really overwhelming, and you can almost feel like you failed if you did what that person said and it didn't work. So I think it's important to just do the work and figure it out for yourself, because only you will really know what works. We're all different. There isn't a right answer. So that's where I would probably leave that for myself, because I think that something I've definitely learned from is doing it and not just, you know, listening. And I think it all ties in, but I think just doing the work is such an important part of being a freelancer and figuring out what you want. We hope this episode has helped you figure out what to do next. Now it's your turn, Guava Bees. Have you got a burning question that only Guava Bean can help answer? Submit your question in the sandbox or on the website, and we could be answering yours in the next episode. That's all from us. To all creatives, rebels, and digital nomads, keep working online and living free.
Want to know more about the Freelancer Sandbox? Visit guavabean.com/sandbox to start your free trial now.